Hello everyone and welcome to this week's episode of the Ratliff Mandolins Weekly Production Diary. My name is Audie Ratliff and I'd like to take a few moments to have a chat about how the workflow is going to go around the Ratliff Mandolins workshop, not only this week but probably for the next few weeks. As you know, I work on mandolins in batches of 10 and I have 10 mandolins here. Typically they have all of their parts glued on. They don't have frets put in them yet, and they don't have the final neck sized and shaped. The necks are still rough, I guess, would be a good way of putting it. And that's where most of them are at. The exceptions are this one here, which has already had the stain in the first few coats of finish on it. And there's two of them that need to have some inlay put in them. One of them has inlay put in not only in the peg head, but also in the fretboard. And 4 of them or so need to have binding put around the peg head. And the only one that I've done up till now is this mandolin right here. It's one of the extras and it's got all but the last piece put on it. So that's kind of where all of the batch is. Now the workflow for the day, and that will happen every day, probably for the next 10 weeks, will be to take the mandolin that's closest to being finished with strings put on it, and for right now, this one, I will do whatever needs to be done with this one, and then just work my way back down the line. This is mandolin actually number 2 in the batch, and today, here just as soon as I get done shooting this video, I will put sandpaper to this one. It's had the stain put on it, and it's got the first build coats of clear lacquer on it. So now it needs to be sanded out. All the dust and little imperfections in the finish need to be sanded out. Another coat of finish put on it, and then we'll see. Eventually what will happen, I'll have a good finish on it, and I'll put it up to cure. I'll just hang it on the wall again for another week or 10 days, and then we'll put keys and stuff on it, put strings on it, and get it out the door, and continue on down the line. So my work day is going to consist of taking the one closest to the finish in the morning, working, doing whatever I can do to it, and then just picking the next one, do whatever I can do to it, the next one down the line, the next one down the line, and in the end, which usually works out to be about 1 finished mandolin a week when I get to this point. So if I've got 10 mandolins, this is going to be kind of the way life is for me for the next 10 weeks, basically. So as always, I'm going to just turn the camera on and carry it around with me and film whatever seems to be interesting to see. And that's how my week is going to go. And I appreciate you being here. Stick with us to the very end. And let's get our week started. And now the first thing I got done today was this mandolin, number 2, has had the finish sanded off and a fresh coat of clear lacquer put down on it. And this mandolin here has had its last piece of binding attached to the peg head. A couple of steps progress made. Okay, I have now sanded and shot the final coats of finish on this, the first mandolin in this batch to have its finish completely applied. It's mandolin number 2. And so it is time for me to call the customer and say, okay, we're this far along and we'll be having a mandolin with the strings on it in the next couple of weeks. So let's get the business end of the deal taken care of and figure out how I'm going to get the mandolin to you, and all that detail work needs to be done. But there you have it, mandolin number 2, final coats of finish on it. And now I'm going to wrap a piece of binding, glue a piece of binding on mandolin's the peg head of mandolin number 1, and then I'll probably pick the next victim in line to have its color and finish put on, and I think it's just going to be mandolin number 3. So First piece of binding on peg head number 1. When you're gluing 3-ply binding like this on a peg head, some of these pieces you have to do them in separate glues, the inner binding and then the outer binding, but fortunately on this first piece you can do them both at the same time. Just like the body of the instrument, the peg head has 3-ply binding on this side and on this side as well. It is early Wednesday morning, and it's going to be a short work day because after lunch, Bonnie has an eye exam, and she won't be able to drive after that, so I've got to take her to town. But until then, I'm going to put one more piece of binding on Mandolin number 1's peg head, and then I'm going to pull the next mandolin, which would be mandolin number 3, and start the finish prep, cleaning up the neck and all that. Hopefully we'll get some finish on mandolin number 3 before the end of the week. Piece number 2. Yesterday I spent all day with mandolin number 3, which is going to be the second mandolin in the batch here to get finished put on it. I sanded all day with it, cleaned it up. It's all pretty close to being done. It needs to have the frets put in, and then it needs to be wetted down all over in that grain raising process. And so that's next on my list of things to do, is to put frets in this one. I have the fretboard already leveled and radiused with these fretboard sanding blocks with sandpaper put to them. Everything is slicked down and it's ready to go, except for just double checking the bottoms of the slots and making sure that there's no obstructions and no dust or anything that's going to keep that fret tang from going all the way down. And there's very seldom anything there, but boy, I like to just touch every fret and just make sure. And now we are ready to install the frets. And there's the first fret in mandolin number 3. And there is the last fret. Now I clean up these sharp clipped fret ends with a file inset at a certain angle into a block of wood. Now both sides of the fretboard have been done. We're back into the other room to do the final sanding, check everything, make sure we're 100% happy, and then we can do the grain raising thing in preparation for putting the stain on. Okay, it's been one of those kind of days, very, very busy, but I did indeed get as far as getting the water on mandolin number 3 here. So we're raising the grain and we put a stain on it first thing Monday morning. Right now it's pushing 6 o'clock pretty hard and I got family here, and so I'm gonna have to knock off for the day. Pick back up on the next video in the next episode of the Ratliff Mandolins weekly production diary, and I hope you'll come back next week to see us put stain on mandolin number 3. Until then, my name is Audie Ratliff. Thank you so very much for watching. Hit the like and subscribe button, and we'll see you next week.